Welcome and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to take an inside look at NCAA Division III. My name is Katie Anderson and my colleague is David Steckel, and together we are the Student Athlete Advisors. For more than 30 years, our combined experience, we've been working together with student athletes and their families, helping them navigate this process properly. We've also, over the past number of years, been helping our fellow counselors as well, independent counselors as well as high school, college counselors, learn about the ins and outs of the college athletic recruiting process. And we hope that this presentation on NCAA Division III sports will inspire you to understand some of the nuances between the various divisions and how NCAA Division III sports can really benefit your student athletes. If you'd like to learn more, obviously visit our website, but for now, let's get to the details of NCAA Division III. Okay, we're going to start by just giving you a brief overview of the various divisions. Division I, there are 350 institutions that are part of Division I and approximately 170,000 student athletes that participate. And in Division I, they can offer athletic scholarships as well as merit scholarships and need-based financial aid. Division II has 308 schools that participate and approximately 102,000 student athletes, also offering the same kind of athletic scholarships and merit aid and need-based aid. Maybe surprisingly, Division III actually has the most institutions, 450 institutions across the United States that participate, 190,000 student athletes. But one thing that's very different about Division III is that they do not offer athletic scholarships. They only offer need-based aid and merit-based aid. And that is one distinguishing factor and one that many student athletes kind of hear and then they think, oh, I don't even want to look at those schools. But I hope that my presentation today will really help you understand why it's very important to consider these schools as a factor and make sure that your students understand the differences between the various divisions and what Division III schools really truly have to offer. You can see on the chart on the right under undergraduate size that many of these schools are smaller schools. Almost 30% of them are between 2,000 and 5,000 undergraduate students, and almost 60% of them have less than 2,000 undergraduate students. This just, and if you look at the pie chart on the bottom, you can see that 20% are public, but 80% are private. So typically they are smaller private schools. But I think that you'll start to understand some of the wonderful things that they have to offer. And especially when a student athlete might say, well, I only want a big school experience. Sometimes you can at least, help them understand what these smaller schools may have to offer that might be a benefit to them. Okay. This screen will show you where these schools are typically located. You can find this map if you go to ncaa.org. There is a link there for where the member schools are located. You can see I'm based in California. We do not have a lot of Division III schools on the West Coast, but you can see the majority of them are located in the Midwest, the Northeast, and scattered throughout the South. Again, this makes it interesting for kids here in California when we start talking about Division III schools that, if they tell me that they really want that Midwest or East Coast experience, I make sure that they're aware that this opportunity does definitely exist. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the sports that are offered in Division III. You can see here from this chart that, just like at a Division I or Division II levels, you've got 3 different seasons. You've got a wide variety of sports that are offered. I've noted here in red those sports that have more than 200 schools with that sport available. And you can see from the chart that sports like cross country, soccer, women's volleyball, basketball. These are all sports that have more than 400 schools that offer their sport and may be a great fit for your student athlete. So you can find a list of these schools if you go to scholarshipstats.com. They're also listed on the NCAA directory under the link that I've provided here at the bottom. Okay, this next slide will talk a little bit about athletic competition. One thing that I often hear from student athletes is they make the assumption that Division III athletics aren't as good as Division I. And, in many cases, Division I is, top level of competition. But what I'm trying to illustrate here with this chart is I looked at swimming, since it's a time-based sport. And I wanted to point out that the top chart, I looked at the #1 time for the 50 freestyle for men's short course yards for last year, 2017-2018. The top bar chart is 17. You can see that the fastest swimmer for Division I was 17.63 seconds. The fastest swimmer for Division II was 19.17 seconds, and the fastest swimmer for Division III was 19.37 seconds. Now you can see that in men's, especially this race, the 50 freestyle, that it's really, there's not much difference between the #1 and the #600 swimmer. We're talking a matter of seconds here. But I'd like to point out that on the bottom, you can see that I found the times for the #600 swimmer for Division I, Division II, and Division III. So there's two things I'd like to point out. And one is that the fastest Division III swimmer is faster than the #600 Division I swimmer. Not by a lot, but still you can see that those kids that are competing at the top of Division III are also potentially Division I athletes. But maybe they're not going to be on the relay team. Maybe they're not going to be, the fastest or even the top, 2 or 3 swimmers on a Division I team. At the kind of the lower end of Division I. So that's where these athletes are great candidates for looking at Division III, just purely from a time-based perspective in this sport. But when you apply this to all different sports, it's the same kind of thing. You look at kids who are top Division III candidates, and maybe they're also looking at D1 schools. And you will see that one of the kids that I interview as part of this presentation, he was a lacrosse player, but he was also looking at Division I schools in addition to Division III schools. And you find that that's quite common. Something else I'd like to point out is that the Division III swimmer, the #600 swimmer at 22.03 seconds was still faster than the #600 swimmer at Division II level, which was 22.72 seconds. So again, Division III can be quite competitive. Just trying to point out that these are important kind of nuances to understand and help your athletes really understand that Division III has lots of great competition to offer. Okay, what does Division III athletics, what is the thing that they tout the most? And I think that if you read all the material that's available from the NCAA, you find out very quickly that it's really about balance. It's about understanding that Division III has rigorous academics, competitive athletics, and an opportunity to do things outside of school, outside of athletics, internships, study abroad, lots of different activities. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail. But being able to participate in a sorority or fraternity, or do volunteer work, or have an internship, those things are important. And so Division III really does offer kids an opportunity to have that balance. Also, this is very, very important, especially for kids who say that being a student is a top priority for them. That is what you get with Division III. You are first a student and then you're an athlete second. And that is a very important distinction, because at the Division I level, especially when there's athletic scholarships involved, oftentimes students find that they are athletes first and have to sometimes there's a sacrifice that gets made on the academic side. So if you have a student athlete who says that they really want to be a student first, again, encourage them to really look at Division III and understand those differences between those kinds of schools. The Division III schools really offer an opportunity to reduce the conflicts that happen between athletics and academics. They do this through shorter practice times and shorter playing seasons and fewer number of total competitions, no redshirting. There are things that are built into the way that they do things that are very different from Division I and Division II, and they really do offer their kids a break when it comes to, again, prioritizing their academics. And when we talk about the benefits for these student athletes, obviously all of those things factor into a time commitment that is less for athletics when it comes to division, compared to Division I and Division II. So they get more time for their academics, especially when you're talking to a student athlete who says that they want to be in a STEM major, maybe engineering, maybe pre-med. They really want to take those things seriously, and they don't want to miss labs, and they want to have the flexibility to prioritize, their academics first. I can't emphasize enough how important this is. One of my other interviews that you'll hear later in this presentation is with a former colleague or a former teammate of mine, Gretchen Micklitsch. She is currently a soccer coach an assistant coach for Oberlin College in Ohio, and her daughter plays for the women's soccer team at Wash U in St. Louis, and she is an engineering major, and that is a tough school. So she talks a little bit about what that means and why she made, partly why she made her decision to be able to emphasize the academic side of things. As I stated earlier, these kids playing Division III, things like study abroad, undergraduate research, doing capstone projects and senior thesis projects and volunteerism, all that sort of stuff is very doable and very reasonable at a Division III school. These kids actually get an off season. Many times at Division I schools and Division II schools, it's a huge time commitment year round, even in the summer for these kids. Their off season is still pretty heavy duty with training and cross training. So again, at a Division III level, you get to actually have an off season and have more time during the summer to do the things that you might like to do. Another factor to consider is the financial aid side of things. If because there aren't any athletic scholarships, you find that if a student athlete gets into a Division III school, plays for a year or two, decides, you know what, I think I'm done with this, I think I'd like to just focus on academics, there's no fear of losing an athletic scholarship because their admission was based on them being a student, and there's no fear of losing that athletic scholarship if they decide to just focus on academics. Also, it's possible for Division III athletes to play multiple sports. If they're really into it and they love playing year-round, I'll just use the example of water polo and swimming. You really can compete year-round if you want to. That is nearly impossible at a Division I school, but at a Division III school, it's completely possible. One of the books that I referenced at the end of this presentation, it's called Tales from the Small Time by Jim Moore, and one of the stories he tells is of a baseball player, a pitcher, who ended up being injured and kind of on a whim took up cross-country running and ran for Chapman University as a cross-country runner. And it's a really fabulous story, and it certainly shows how determination to participate and be competitive no matter what sport. Granted, this was a long time ago. I think it was back in the 80s, but still, it certainly highlights the fact that at Division III schools, you could actually play multiple sports if you wanted to. In 2015, the NCAA did a study called the Goals Study. And again, just to emphasize the statistics behind the differences in the divisions and the fact that Division III student athletes are in fact doing all the things that they are encouraging them to do. 25%, almost a quarter of them are doing study abroad. almost, look at the 45% of them have a job. Again, something you probably would never find at a Division I level. These are important differences, and again, if that's what the student athlete wants from their college experience, then definitely looking at Division III would be an important factor. If you look at the chart on the right, you're going to see the hours per week spent on athletics versus academics. And you'll see that in all cases, the academic number is higher than the athletic number, which is good. But you can see that there's definitely a shift and a break and a clear difference with the Division III schools, where those kids are actually spending a significantly less number of hours per week in athletics compared to Division I, and that gives them more time to study. Which, if that's again the goal, then that's an important difference. And let's take a quick look also at some of the NCAA research that's been done on graduation rates at Division III schools. And you'll see that over time, consistently, that student athletes have graduated at a higher rate than the average student body at Division III schools. Having been a student athlete myself, I can't say exactly why this is true, but I do know that having a consistent daily routine is an important thing. And I know that, that one thing that happens when a lot of kids will go off to college is all of a sudden they have all this freedom to do whatever they want with their day. And that, the number of hours you spend in a classroom is much different than the way you do it in high school. And so for athletes, having a consistent routine that involves exercise, working out, being part of a team, and going to class and having study hall together and doing some of those routine things can really help. And so again, offering a great opportunity to be consistent with that routine throughout college, and certainly pays off in the form of graduation. Now, to get to the point of no athletic scholarships, a lot of families, a lot of student athletes in particular, will sort of roll their eyes when you say, I want you to look at Division III schools. Primarily, well, there's no athletic scholarships. I don't want to look at that. And that's true. The student athletes who play at Division III are playing for the love of the game, love of their sport. But as I stated earlier, if you should stop wanting to play your sport for any reason, just remember that the flip side of that means that there's no change in financial aid. And while you may not, your student athletes may not realize that when they get into college, 2-3 years down the line, that may be something that they really have to seriously consider. So just something to kind of always be talking about early so that they have time to think about that. The financial aid at Division III schools is either merit-based or need-based, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, because this is a very, very important thing to consider when you're looking at these schools. And also just know that 3/4 of the student athletes in Division III do receive some form of grant or non-athletic scholarship. So it's not as though you're looking at only paying full price at these schools. So I want to bring up this chart, this spreadsheet that was done. I saw this actually initially. This is the presentation, this podcast done by Even Sawyer, the college essay guy, together with Jeff Levy. And this was actually the thing that inspired me to do this NCAA Division III presentation, because it's something that has come up year after year with families who have looked at Division III schools, because immediately they go to the money. They say, well, there's no athletic scholarships, so how are we going to possibly pay for this? And majority of these schools are small private schools. So you can see that if we look just here, and this is just a snippet of the schools on this overall list. But when I saw this list that was done by Jeff and Jenny Kent, I thought, you know what, I bet 3/4 of the schools on this list are Division III, and in fact they were. So I wanted to just give you an understanding of what you need to really look at on the financial aid side. If you look at the total cost of attendance, we'll look at the list of schools. Haverford College at the top is one that has 100% percentage of need of met for their undergrads. and does not really offer merit aid. You're looking at 0% merit aid and zero, obviously if it's 0% merit aid, 0% average merit award. Now, if you look down this list in the percent receiving merit aid column, you'll see that I've selected schools, again, just to give you a sampling of these Division III schools that range from 0% all the way to 100%, which is sort of interesting. They vary on the need-based aid and the need met at these schools. But the most important thing really here when it comes to merit aid is understanding that some schools will offer a little, a small percentage of their students will receive merit aid, but they can receive quite a lot. So let's look at, for example, Wesleyan University, 1% receiving merit aid, but when they get it, they really get it. $43,431 in average merit award. And if you compare that to, say, Washington St. Louis or Washington University in St. Louis, you've got 14% receiving merit aid, but on average $5,305. Let's go to the bottom of that list, and you can see, say, Denison University with 91% of need met and 90% receiving some form of merit aid, and on average $21,862 in merit aid. So again, talking early with your families, if you think that Division III might be an option for your families, please, please, please make sure that you watch this presentation, this podcast by the college essay guy and Jeff Levy, and really understand the nuance of these types of schools, because I can tell you from experience that when certain schools that only offer 100% need-based aid see that you have a student athlete who is a great fit academically for their school but really needs merit aid, it's going to be a really tough fit if they only offer 100% need-based aid and no merit aid. So definitely make sure that you've had that conversation with your families and that they understand what schools offer what kind of merit award. So another part of this is the admission side, which is, again, not all of these small private schools are super crazy hard to get into. There's obviously a range. There's the super, elite, very, very difficult to get into. And then there's the middle of the range. And then there's, I wouldn't say the bottom of the range, but certainly a range that may fit students that have test scores that maybe aren't at the top of the list. So I just took again a sampling of Division III schools within the state of California, and Caltech is at the top in terms of admission rate with 8%, very selective admissions, right? Very, very difficult to get in that school. But then you look at, say, Chapman University with, let's say, ACT composite range here, the middle 50% between 25 and 30 on the ACT, and 54% admission rate. So, some just maybe a great fit for some of your students. And then you can even look at University of Redlands with 22 to 27 as a middle 50% on the ACT composite and a 75% admission rate. So if you're looking for merit money, just realize that there are lots of schools out there where your student athlete may qualify for merit aid with their grades and test scores, and not all of them are the impossible, really, really difficult to get into schools. So keep that open and keep that as an option, and make sure that you educate your families about this important difference. This information I gathered from scholarshipstats.com, and again, if you look up there and you look by sport, you can get all the details about these schools. Okay, so this is something that I want to emphasize when it comes to the admission side for these athletes. It is so important that student athletes are prepared for early admissions. If a school, many of these small private schools will have early decision or early action admissions programs. And it is so, so, so important that these kids are prepared during their junior year, that they've gone on their visits, that they really have a good understanding of where it is that they might be interested in applying, especially for early decision. So, because these schools, these small privates do offer early decision, having your ACT and SAT scores, having the scores that you're happy with, hopefully by October of your senior year, preferably a little bit earlier than that if possible, is important, because then you know that without question, if you have a school that you want to apply to early decision, that you feel really comfortable about making that decision and letting the coach know that you're interested. Also, a number of those really top schools that do require SAT subject tests, something to keep in mind. You don't want to be doing that at the last minute for sure. So make sure that, again, if you're looking at those types of schools, that you've planned out starting in late sophomore year and throughout junior year, for making sure that you have all those numbers prepared. Now, Division III coaches have very little pull in admissions, and this is a big difference when it comes to the difference between Division I, Division II, and Division III. We've heard about the scandal that has, the college admissions scandal that was recently announced just last week, having to do with some coaches who obviously abused their ability to pull kids in through the admissions department as an athlete when they weren't even athletes. This is so important that at Division III schools, these coaches don't really have any pull in admissions. They can flag a student's application in the admissions department, so the admissions department knows that they're a student athlete. But other than that, there's the student athletes really need to be able to get into these schools on their own. But they can also, the coaches at these schools, they can have a student's transcript and test scores they can have the admissions department do a pre-read on them, which again just gives that coach a little bit of security, and the student athlete some security that they're at least in the ballpark of a reasonable choice for that school. But again, those are no promises being made at all. That's just simply a pre-read, and the student athlete still has to go through the proper admissions process and get into the school on their own. It's an interesting fact that about 25% of the student body at the average Division III school are student athletes. So again, this puts a little bit of, that's why a lot of these coaches will put the pressure on the kids to apply early, because they really want to get them in, and they know that that if they can get, lock up those spots early, that they can, make sure that those kids are making the decision to come to their schools. Okay, the NCAA for Division I and Division II has an academic eligibility center, a process that you have to go through. But for Division III schools, they do not have the same process. This has been a little bit confusing for people, because the NCAA recently added, if you look on the right side of the screen, you're going to see a Division III and undecided area. They recently added that. But just know that Division III schools have their own academic eligibility process. They evaluate that based on their own eligibility standards. I think that the reason that they're offering this Division III and undecided option allows student athletes to create a profile for themselves. And if it turns out that they actually do get recruited by a D1 or D2 school, then they can they do this profile for free at D3 or undecided, and then they can just upgrade that profile to a D1 or D2 profile, and then they're ready to roll if they need, if it turns out that those coaches want to recruit them as well. I always just tell kids, just go create the profile. It makes it easy, and that way, either way, you've got it covered. And then when it comes to Division III athletic recruiting, the rules are quite different from D1 as well. We'll just start here at the top with recruiting materials. The students, athletes can receive printed materials at any time. Telephone calls, this is an area where the Division I student athletes, there are some limits on the coaches really when it comes to telephone calls. And at the Division III level, there are no limits. The coach can call you whenever he or she wants, and you can call the coach at your own expense. Off-campus contact, you're going to find that there are no limits on the number of off-campus contacts, but you are allowed to have off-campus contact off the college campus after your sophomore year for Division III. For official visits, this is one where typically at a Division I or Division II school, those schools would pay for the student athlete to come visit the campus. At Division III schools, they typically have smaller budgets. So you may find that that is a little harder for those schools to pay to have the student athletes come. So just be prepared. You may be paying for yourself to go on an official visit. But know that that can start as of January 1 of your junior year, according to the current rules. And that you may, at Division I schools, they put a limit on the number, you can only take 5 visits, but at Division III schools, there are no limits to the number of official visits that you can take. So just know that that's something you can get started on in the middle of your junior year, and take full advantage of it if you can, because lots of times that will help you really solidify your roster spot with a coach. Again, it's all based on your ability to get in the school, but at the same time knowing that a coach really wants you and will do whatever they can to, whatever is within their realm of helping to help you with that admissions process, or whatever else that they are allowed to do, that they can support you however they can. Unofficial visits. These are visits that a coach or the student athlete pays for themselves or the families, and there are no limits on the number of unofficial visits. Again, take these visits as much as you can, as within reason, your sophomore and junior year, and that will really help you know that when the time comes to make a decision, especially if it has to be an early decision, that you feel comfortable making that decision, and you know that that's a school that you would choose to, if they accept you, that you're absolutely going there and you'd be happy with that decision. You can download the guide for the college-bound student athlete from ncaapublications.com. They update this document every year in July, and every year it gets better and better. So you download it for free, or if you'd like to buy copies, they charge a pretty nominal fee for a pack of 25, and it's a nice glossy brochure that you can hand out to your student athletes. So to add a little depth to this presentation, in terms of being able to give you some insight from people who have been through it themselves, I have done 2 interviews that complement this particular presentation. The first is with Matt Karzak. He's a former student of mine, and he is currently a junior playing men's lacrosse at John Carroll University in Ohio. He talks all about his experience as a lacrosse player, and especially as a player he's had some injuries, and he's been able to do some things to stay engaged with his lacrosse team and do things that maybe he wouldn't have had the opportunity to do at Division I school. So he's very, very happy with where he's ended up. And my second interview is with Gretchen Micklitsch, and she is a former teammate of mine from Duke University from the women's soccer team. She is currently, she's a volunteer assistant coach at Oberlin College in Ohio, and she's also the parent of a women's soccer player at WashU in St. Louis. So she speaks from both the inside of the coaching perspective as well as the parent perspective. And I hope that those interviews again just reiterate the importance and the truth in what Division III schools, the kind of the promise they make about balance and the emphasis on academics. So some additional resources that will help you. The NCAA has a website that focuses on Division III, so that link is there. I've mentioned this scholarship stats site numerous times throughout this presentation. It's a simple resource to go to find information about all the schools that offer various sports and some of the admissions details behind that. and every year that they have managed to also give some other, they keep adding in stats when it comes to uh, some of, again, those the amount of time spent on athletic versus academics in various sports, guys versus girls, all sorts of things. So I find that website's very, very helpful. There's a great article in the Huffington Post from April of 2017 called "In Praise of Division III Athletics." I encourage you to look that up and read it again, just reiterating all the things that I've talked about in this presentation. And the book that I mentioned earlier, Tales from the Small Time by Jim Moore. Jim Moore was the athletic information director at Chapman University in the 80s when they decided to go from a sort of a hybrid Division I, Division II program to giving up all their athletic scholarships and going Division III. And it gives wonderful insight into this process from the administrative perspective, from the coach's perspective, and the player's perspective. It's a really easy read and very entertaining, and lots of fun to hear the stories of these kids. So highly encourage you to read that and continue to understand what it means to be a part of Division III. And finally, just wanted to let you know that, like I mentioned earlier, we, David and I together, we have professional development services for counselors, independent and high school counselors. We offer a counselor's manual. This is a document that it's a book that you will receive that, if you're interested, you can go on our website and purchase that. It is the manual that is the documentation for our 11-session webinar series. Every session is about an hour long, and so it is in-depth. It is more in-depth advice about how to advise college-bound student athletes more than you will find anywhere else. We give lots and lots of insight and tools and great understanding of the nuances. Again, the small details that can help make you a better counselor when it comes to advising your student athletes. In addition, we offer the do-it-yourself guide. That's for a very small fee, but that's something that you can give to your student athletes and your families to help them initiate the process. That's really the getting started part. And we also offer coaching and mentorship for counselors who have been a part of our webinar series or our workshops to help support them from the backside, to make sure that especially if you're just getting started with working with student athletes and you feel like you are not ready to maybe do it 100% on your own and you'd like someone to act as kind of an advisor on the backside, then that's what we can help you with there too. So thank you so much for joining us today. I encourage you to listen to the webinar presentations and the interviews that I've done with Matt Karzak and Gretchen Micklitsch, and thank you so much. And please contact us at our website for any questions you may have, and feel free to call us as well. Thank you so much.